Hi everyone, welcome to this webinar. We will just wait a couple of minutes until everyone is joined and then we'll start off. All right, let's kick off. Welcome to this webinar, Digital Accessibility from Legal Requirement to Business Strategic Success. Let me first start by introducing IO. We are a blended agency, consists out of 2,000 plus experts shared among 12 campuses in 5 countries. Our belief is that experience is everything, and to me, it's even experience is everything to everyone. Some practicalities, if you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. Q&A will be at the end of the webinar. Recording and slides will also be shared via mail if you want to look back at this webinar. Welcome, my name is Tim Dujardin. I'm Head of Accessibility at IO. I have 10 years of experience working on digital solution development. I have certifications in accessibility and in UX design, and I've also worked for brands such as Toyota, Plopsa, Voca, and so forth. Let me first start by explaining why I am here today, telling you or sharing the story about digital accessibility is because accessibility is a social aspect, it's an ethical aspect, but to me it's a very personal aspect. People in my family that are very close to my heart are impacted by this, so they are the first line of my everyday motivation to work on this subject. Next to that, I also have watched TV shows, listened to podcasts with and about people with disabilities, and they are currently really feeling left behind. So I think we must start practicing empathy. Our society is mostly built on the individual at this moment. So we have to focus on helping someone else because that's what really fulfills our society. In the end, we are all just human beings trying to find their way in society that is becoming more and more digital. Banking offices are closing, moving to e-banking. But what we don't see or don't recognize immediately is that people still need a physical point of contact. So that's why accessibility is important, not only on a digital aspect, but also on a physical aspect. Accessibility is a human right. It's not a legal burden. It's not about avoiding risks, avoiding fines, avoiding negative PR. No, it's about protecting human rights, making sure everyone can participate in a society. So for this webinar, I will be talking about what is accessibility, who is impacted, why is it a successful strategy, how can you grow towards accessibility excellence, and what can I do for you in this? First of all, what is accessibility? First thing of accessibility is protecting human rights and preventing discrimination. There is a convention of the United Nations, the UNCRPD, stands for the Convention for Rights of People with Disabilities. And I want to highlight 2 articles within that convention, Article 21, Article 19, about providing, Article 21, access to information regardless of your ability or disability. It can be as simple as providing a visual with a promo message which doesn't have a textual alternative, meaning people who can't rely on the visual characteristics of that image don't have any access to that information. So it's kind of a discrimination topic. Next to that, Article 19, living independently and being included in a community, is about, for example, using public transport. In this case, the screenshot you see is a route planning mechanism of a public transport service in Belgium, where it's currently not possible as a keyboard-only user to select a starting point of your route planning. In the end, those people won't be able to plan their route, see which bus they have to take at what time, because they're only using keyboards. An example is people with motor disabilities, for example, and let that be a segment of our population that most of the time or very often uses public transport because they can't drive a car themselves or can't use a bike themselves. Next to human rights and discrimination, it's also part of WCAG, compliance to WCAG. You've probably seen this term before. It's about web content accessibility guidelines, a set of guidelines developed by the W3C, the International Web Consortium, to make sure that we can evaluate products, evaluate services against a universal set of guidelines. Those guidelines are based on 4 principles: perceivable, operable, understandable, and robust, where perceivable is about gaining information with different senses. Can I rely on visual characteristics, but do I also have a textual alternative, for example? Operable, simplicity to use, depending on my context, my setup of input devices, keyboard, mouse combination, or keyboard only. Understandable is about the content. Is it clear to understand? Can I use the content? Can I interpret the content? Where robust is about providing device agnostic services. So independently of the user agent that you're using, browser, input device, assistive tech, that there is support for all types of devices. If you zoom into those principles, you have different criteria. For example, non-text content. We all know images that they need alt text in certain scenarios. That's an example of perceivable, because if you can't rely on visual characteristics, you can't perceive the information of the image if there is no alternative text. Operable means, for example, I'm only using a keyboard, so no keyboard and mouse combination, as we most of the time see. Only a keyboard. Can I control all the content through a keyboard alone? Next to that, understandable about language, for example. Setting the page language correctly will make sure that people with a screen reader, for example, can interpret and understand the text correctly. So please check if your page is in a different, rendered in a different language than your page language is configured, then it will cause, for example, a Dutch rendered content is pronounced in an American English accent that will prohibit understandability of your content. Last but not least, robust is about the technical implementation regarding accessibility. So semantics is a correct implementation used to make sure that every device can interpret the information the way it needs. So those are the 4 principles. Another important aspect of the WCAG, the guidelines, is conformance levels. You have 3 levels: single A, double A, triple A, where single A is a minimal basic accessibility requirements, double A is about the legal requirements, and triple A is about the advanced requirements, adding an extra layer of complexity. So that's the reason why most of the legislation only refers to double A as a legal requirement. That means single A and double A have both to be respected. So not only double A, but also single A. From a legal point of view, in Europe, you have 2 legislations. So you have the Web Accessibility Directive, legislation focused on the public sector bodies. It's already into effect in 2020 and 2021. Now we, of course, have the European Accessibility Act, which has a much broader scope, which will go into full effect next month, end of next month. The most important thing is to mention here that currently the reference will be to WCAG version 2.1 AA, where it's not yet confirmed by the European Accessibility Act that they will refer to 2.1. Possibility can also be that they refer to 2.2. So in this case, I would recommend, if you are starting your accessibility program, that you already start focusing on 2.2, since 2.2 guidelines are already published since October 2023. So it's a big opportunity for the 2.2 to be already started. Function of the EAA, so the European Accessibility Act, is to standardize accessibility rules across the EU. Currently, the situation is that every country has its own accessibility rules, his own accessibility legislation, and own interpretation of the WCAG guidelines. The goal of the EAA is to provide a universal baseline standard, so European standard, where all countries have to adhere to and transpose that standard into their national legislation. So that's the goal of EAA. EAA is relevant, of course, to a very broad perspective. Examples are e-commerce, banking services, audiovisual media, for example, streaming platforms, and so forth. So it's a very broad scope, having a lot of impact on our society. Now, We've seen what is accessibility. Now, who is impacted? So basically, where or who are we doing it for? 1 in 4 people in the EU has a disability. So that's a valuable segment that you're currently ignoring or missing out on. In Belgium, that's also 1 in 4. In the Netherlands, it's even 1 in 3, 32% approximately. But those are statistics from the European Council, so they have to be taken into account. Next to that, for Belgium specific, we have statistics about digital vulnerability. 4 out of 10 Belgians are digitally vulnerable. That means, for example, they don't have any internet at home, they have never used e-administration before, and perhaps they have no or limited digital skills. So in the end, referring back to the banking offices, if you move all the banking services or most of the banking services to e-banking, that will result into discriminating people who are digitally vulnerable that don't have any internet or no digital skills. So take that into account. Next to that, disabilities. We have to zoom into the term of disabilities to the intrinsic value of the word. Disability means I can't perform a certain task. We have different categories: blind, deaf, reading disability, cognitive, and so forth. Most important to understand here is we're talking about a spectrum. We're talking about people. There are no fixed categories. The message I want to spread here is I get often remarks, yeah, but my product isn't used by blind people. Accessibility is a lot broader than just blind people. Often we see combinations of disabilities, even where you see cognitive disability is often correlated with a reading disability and so forth. So it's a whole spectrum, different levels. So keep that in mind. Next to that, we look at disability most of the times in a permanent situation. People in a wheelchair, people having only one arm, people having a vision impairment, for example. But we also have disabilities in other contexts. For example, a temporary disability can be that you have broken your arm. In that case, you are referring to the same user patterns as someone with a permanent disability. So if you take that into account, seeing that the end user is becoming more critical every day, if you can tap into those specific contexts, you will also increase the overall user experience. Another example, so you have the permanent disabilities, then the previous example was a temporary disability. The last one is a situational disability. It's not a temporary, spread across days or weeks or months. It's a temporary situation, for example, holding your newborn baby, which in the end results in the same user patterns. You can only use your right arm in terms of this image. So you will rely on the same characteristics as someone with a permanent disability having one arm, or a temporary having a broken arm. That's why Microsoft created this visual. It's called a persona spectrum. It's part of their inclusive design program, where, for example, the different senses are mapped to the different scenarios. Example is hearing. Permanent disability, permanent hearing impairment can be you are deaf. Temporary can mean you have a temporary ear infection. Situational can be that you're in a heavy or a noisy environment, or the other way around. You're in a library, but you want to watch a video. In all three circumstances, you'll have to rely on alternatives for the auditive content because you can't rely on that in a permanent, temporary, or situational context. That's what we call, in the accessibility community, the curb cut effect. When we design initially for disabilities, for example, the lowered curb cut, we initially designed that for people with wheelchairs, but other people, everyone in the end will benefit, such as people with a bike, people with a stroller, with a skateboard. So that's why the curb cut effect is a very important message we want to spread. Checkpoint 1, what is accessibility? Referring back to the previous slides, protecting human rights, applying universal principles, so the 4 principles of WCAG, and improving overall user experiences in the 3 situations that you can encounter. Now, where do we stand from a European and a global perspective? In Europe, according to research of Craftsing, 94% of European websites fail to meet WCAG guidelines. It's a sample of 260,000 homepages in 18 European countries, so it's a valuable statistic to show that the score of accessibility in Europe is very bad. If we zoom out to a worldwide statistic, different company did the research. WebAIM It's an American research where they stated that 95% approximately of the homepages of the top 1 million websites also had WCAG failures, meaning some features are not accessible to everyone. And what's even more compelling is that over the last 6 years, accessibility has only improved 3% worldwide. So there's a huge gap to be filled, a huge progress to be made, so you can already tap into the opportunities that lay ahead. Next to that, sector specifically, also part of the WebAIM research called the WebAIM Million Report, we see that government scores best in class, not right the position that they want to be in, but they are scoring the best according to other sectors. The most compelling at this moment is that shopping is at the bottom of the table, scoring worst. And if you take into account the e-commerce segment of the European Accessibility Act, then there's a lot of margin to be taken. That's why I believe companies that start with accessibility today and start the innovation progress in terms of accessibility will stand out immediately. Because in a foreign environment, in the end, we are all social animals. In a foreign environment, we will start to look for people, brands, companies that share the same beliefs that we have, and that will create a bond, an enormous trust with the brand or the company that you own. Examples of 2009, for example, is that at Apple, they started the iPhone iOS accessibility program, where they included VoiceOver, which is the screen reader of Apple. They also added Zoom, which is a tool for people with low vision to be able to zoom the text, zoom the content. Also, white on black, for example, enhanced contrast, and so forth. That evolved from 2009 until now into accessibility as a full department in Apple. So they focus on accessibility on all of their products, in the end, to support their slogan, make it yours. So they understand the goal of accessibility really well, to make sure that everything is customizable, or at least at the maximum level of customizability, to make sure that everyone can use the technology and the products that Apple produces. Another example is Xbox, more in the gaming industry. Through strong partnerships, they built the adaptive controller, which is kind of a hub where you can connect your preferred input type. So apart from the default controller, you can also tap in or plug in different input devices. And in the end, it's the same message, make it yours. In terms of accessibility at Xbox, they call it just customize your experience. Customizability is an essential aspect of accessibility. So let's take a look at a video how it works, and then we'll see how to configure and to see what the end result is. So you already see it's a kind of a hub that they connect with the different joysticks, and they map the different input devices that they use to the different keys that are normally taking part in the default controller. Again, applying customizability the way you want, and to make sure that everyone can have fun, can play a game, and can play games with people also without disabilities. So that's a fantastic message, in my opinion. So my question to you, do you also want to stand out? Do you also provide support to the people who really need it? Then you have to change from a reactive mindset to a proactive mindset. Current state, most of the time, is a reactive mindset because we're followed by lawsuits, followed by the European Accessibility Act coming into effect. But the proactive mindset is a more sustainable approach to a successful accessibility business strategy. But changing a mindset takes some time, takes some progress. So that's why you have to determine for yourself, what is our incentive to work on accessibility? Is it that we are driven by risk mitigation, avoiding fines, avoiding complaints, negative PR? Then you're in a reactive state at this moment. If you are driven by moral ambition, then you're in a proactive state because you want to make an impact. You want to start to have a conversation with people who are feeling left behind. You want to evaluate your design to a more universal design, and you also take into account the people with low or no digital skills. Next to moral ambition, of course, seeing the current state of the market, you can also be driven by market opportunities. That's why I believe accessibility at this moment is a strategy that you can apply to make sure that you stand out according or in relevancy to your competitors. 3 arguments that support the message of accessibility as a business strategy. First of all, business growth, market expansion. There's an untapped market segment of 27% with people over the age of 16 in the EU. So if you're not focusing on accessibility or don't provide any accessible products or services, as basically saying to 27% of the EU population, we don't want to do business with you, we don't care about you. Next to that, of course, according or corresponding with that 27% segment, you also have an annual disposable income in the EU that is estimated to 1.1 trillion euros in revenue potential. Last but not least, aging population, a very important consideration because the World Health Organization estimated that by 2050, over 2 billion people worldwide will be over 60 years old. Many requiring, of course, accessibility accommodations, low vision, mobility, and so forth. 2 billion people, that's almost a double compared to 2015. So it's a very important consideration. Second argument, competitive advantage. If you, as your brand, shine a light in the darkness, make sure that the things that the people believe with a disability also are the things that you believe or that you expose with your brand or your company, I will promise you it will create a strong bond and it will emerge to trust and customer loyalty. In the end, they will also start to communicate about your product, that they have a positive experience, and that will result in a positive brand reputation. And important to mention here is that the alternative is not a neutral brand reputation, it's a negative brand reputation, because if you're not focusing on accessibility, people will start filing lawsuits, filing complaints, and do negative PR in terms of your brand of product. So the alternative is not 0 to 100, it's minus 100 to plus 100. And of course, if you are the innovator, you're the one that stands out at first, people will look at you as a reference, and that will create a strong brand association with inclusion. Third argument for accessibility as business strategy, SEO. In the end, if you provide textual alternatives, for example, for an image or a video through captions, transcripts, and so forth, that will make sure that the search indexers also will be able to index that information. Currently, Google can't index video material or image material, visual material. So if you provide an alternative text, you will also improve your rankings, your content discoverability, and in the end, another important aspect, user engagement. Research shown that in the UK, approximately 70% of the people who encounter accessibility issues on a page will immediately move away from the page. So if you focus on accessibility, you take into account usability for everyone, that will improve your user engagement, it will lower your bounce rates, and it will provide you with longer session times. In the end, ending up with a better SEO performance. So checkpoint 2, why is accessibility a successful business strategy? Business and growth in a market, competitive advantage towards your competitors, and also improved SEO, improved discoverability. So we've seen what is accessibility about, who are we doing it for, why is it a successful strategy? Now tell me, how can I compose such a strategy? First of all, we have to know what our objective is. We have to know what our target is. So that's why we've mapped 3 conformance targets, starting from 50%, ending in 99% compliance. 50% is the minimal because from a legal point of view, there are 2 aspects to take into account. You have to provide an accessibility statement, and next to that, you have to be compliant with the WCAG at a minimum level of 50%. So minimal 50% is a starting point. That's why we mapped that to a minimal accessibility group, where you can provide a starting point. We have developed a specific audit to reach that minimal accessibility. Next to that, average accessibility and excellent accessibility. is where we want everyone to go to, ideally 80 plus compliancy, but we know there are some steps to be taken, so we identify that there is a need for progress and not the need to make you anxious about the accessibility guidelines. Of course, in the current situation, if you want to go for excellent accessibility right away, you want to be a front runner, a reference in the market, that will make you currently an accessibility innovator. So if we have defined our target, we can also define our roadmap. A roadmap in accessibility terms is investing in building your accessibility maturity. Accessibility maturity is built on top of a maturity matrix, considering 5 aspects: communication, knowledge, delivery, procurement, and user testing. All those aspects contribute to a successful program. First of all, communication. You have to provide clear and honest communication to your end user about the current state of your products or services. So, step 1 in communication, evaluate your products, evaluate your processes, so perform an audit. Second step, you have to communicate to the end users what is your current state. So if you know your current state through evaluation, you have to publish your statement, communicate this is the current state in a clear and honest way. And then if you also take into consideration the conformance target a couple of slides ago that you want to aim for, you can combine the current state and the target state within that statement to communicate to the customer, I know we are doing bad at this moment, but our target or our commitment is somewhere there. Of course, next to that, you can also explain how you will perform that plan of action from the current to the target state, again, added to the accessibility statement. In the meantime, while you're evaluating your products, publishing your accessibility statement, you should also launch communication channels. Ideally, specific contact form, telephone number, email address, a specific mailbox for accessibility remarks, to make sure that people who are encountering issues, that they report directly to you and not through negative PR, negative advertisement, and so forth. So start the communication with the end user to make sure that you talk to those people. Second part, knowledge, is about broadening your perspective. You have, of course, to start with the right mindset. A reactive mindset is not sustainable. A proactive mindset is the sustainable approach. Next to that, you have to grow your culture through expertise building with training programs. Depending on the profiles that are embedded within your product development cycle, you have to provide custom training to make sure they have the sufficient experience and expertise to work on accessibility. Next to that, if you can, start to build partnerships with disability groups, vulnerability groups, to really understand and to research with people who encounter those issues. Next to that, also evaluate your values and standards as a company and try to embed accessibility into those values and standards to make sure that the things that you believe as a company, as a brand, also are the same things that people with disabilities believe. Third part, delivery. This is an optional thing. If you are working with delivery teams, for example, you're working with design teams, development teams, then I advise you to shift accessibility as much as left as possible. The reason why is the current state, we often launch our product and then see that we have to be accessibility compliant. We perform an audit and we have to go all the way back to the start to see what design issues are related to accessibility, what development issues, and so forth. So the best cost-benefit solution is to make sure that you start in discovery and design phase with embedding accessibility checkpoints to make sure the cost benefit is as high as possible. Next to that, you have to define quality thresholds. If you launch a product, you'll probably have a go live checklist. You also need to create or add accessibility sign-off requirements to meet your target that was your original conformance rate that you decided a couple of slides ago. Next to that, to maintain all the work, to maintain the level of quality of service that you have invested in through accessibility, you also have to maintain it through continuous monitoring to see if the current state is becoming worse with the new product launch or is it improved. Next to that, you also have to define an assessment strategy. Based on the types of testing and monitoring that you do, you will need a different assessment strategy. Fourth argument, procurement. If you're working with external services, for example, you have an e-commerce platform, you're working with external services within your purchase flow, then you should align with them to make sure that services that you're using from an external point of view, that they also meet the requirements, the values and standards regarding accessibility of your company, that you can guarantee to the end user that the conformance rate, the level of accessibility is maintained at all levels. So you have to evaluate upon your purchasing, before you're purchasing services, make sure that you are also taking into account accessibility. Next to that, if you're working with external teams, same conversation. Do they have the adequate knowledge and expertise? Talk to them. Do they align with the company's values and standards? And make sure that they grow towards the company's values and standards to make sure that the quality of service is maintained across all teams, all services. Last but not least, of course, 100% of our customers are people. So we have to do user research. We have to get to know our target audience, and we have to identify, recognize their access barriers to make sure that we understand the issues that lay ahead and how to fix them. In the end, accessibility is about connecting with people. Checkpoint 3, how to build your successful accessibility program. First of all, know where you are going, minimal, average, excellent, and build your maturity based on those 5 aspects. I know starting with building your maturity is a big investment, so that's why I wanted to have you a head start and explain you why you should start with step 1 and step 2, communication and knowledge. Communication is essential regarding the new legislation. You have to know where you are, you have to provide an accessibility statement, and you have to start commitment or to show commitment to the end user. So first of all, evaluate your products, know where you are. Publish an accessibility statement, communicate where you are, communicate where you want to go, show if you want to, the plan, how you will reach your conformance rate. And in the meantime, launch communication channels, start to have a conversation with people with disabilities, people who are digitally vulnerable, to make sure that they have a point of contact with you and not through the press, for example. Step 2, knowledge. Change your mindset. Start with changing your mindset. Shift away from the reactive mindset, go to a proactive mindset. And start investing in growing your culture through training, standardization, and partnerships. Because in the end, accessibility is not a problem to be solved, it is a culture to be built. Of course, we as IO can also help with creating or building your maturity program. First of all, step 1, evaluation of your products. We provide 3 types of audits: quick audit, typical, and full audit. Quick audit has nothing to do with compliancy. It's just an automated test to provide you with an indication of how good are you doing or how bad are you doing. So this is only automated testing based on 17 of the 55 WCAG 2.2 AA criteria, meaning 17 criteria that we've selected ourselves where the most impact lies on your end user. Typical audit is a focus on the minimal accessibility conformance rate, so the first tile in the conformance rate part of the 3 segments, where you reach partially compliancy, so reaching 50% plus compliancy with the WCAG criteria through evaluating only 28 of 55 criteria. Next to that, full audit, excuse me, is about providing maximal accessibility, testing all criteria, and in the end, we want to make a difference through our deliverables. We want to provide 2 reports and a remediation plan, where most of the audits only provides 1 audit report with technical remediation and no remediation plan or an extra report to interpret the technical report. So those 2 documents, those 2 reports are at first technical document. Of course, you need a mapping, different guidelines. Are we failed? Are we compliant? And how to fix if we are failing. So that's why we provide technical information, testing methodology for your users, for your technical profiles, to make sure they can perform the same testing and to identify if the issue has been fixed in the end. Per criterion, we will be providing a status, passed, failed, not relevant, and so forth. We will add an extra layer of prioritization, impact. Is it a high priority issue? Is it a warning? Is it the best practice? And we will also explain why it is failing, so our observations, and also provide a solution. to fill in the gap. So the solution that we've had is to fill in the gap between the maturity that is currently within our market state and to fill the gap towards more solution-driven development. Next to that, you will also receive an executive document. Target group is not technical profiles. It's about stakeholders, C-level people, managers, and so forth, to make sure that they can interpret the technical document with some statistics, but also with the remediation plan. How to go from the current state of accessibility to the conformance rate, the target that they want. Next to that, the remediation plan will also contain a priority scale for backlog refinement. So the priority scale is a scale based on 3 levels where you can define yourself, your backlog, based on, for example, high priority issues within the perceivable principle, focused on conformance level single A. So those are the 3 layers that we are providing with the priority scale. So starting with how much is my impact, high priority, warning, best practice. Next to that, principle, perceivable, operable, understandable, robust, and then you can focus on conformance level, single A or double A, allowing you to define the priorities yourself and to decide how to invest your time and budget. Next to that, communication is also about publishing an accessibility statement. We can help you with a minimal statement, including only the most essential parts of legal compliancy. And next to that, we also provide guidance for complete statement, where we include all parts, even explaining the remediation plan and so forth, if you want to provide excellent communication to your end user and showing extra commitment. Next to that, we can help you with knowledge building, growing your culture. We have 3 training programs at this moment. For content creation, if you're a webmaster who creates content in a CMS, for example, we can help you with accessible content creation. We can help you with accessible design. If you're involved with design teams, if you're using external design teams, we can help train them towards universal design and accessibility. Next to that, we can also help with accessible development training, where we provide a full day of hands-on workshop with exercises, tooling, testing workflows, and so forth to make sure that all your development profiles are becoming more accessibility mature. So checkpoint 4, where to start? Start with step 1, communication. Again, referring to the legal compliancy landscape. Know where you are, communicate where you are, where you want to go to, and start a conversation with your end user through communication channels. Step 2, build your knowledge from a reactive mindset, move away from reactive, go to proactive, and grow your culture, invest in your culture through training, standardization, and partnerships. As IO being, we can help you with 3 of those 5 things, just to mention. To round it off, 5 key takeaways of this webinar. Accessibility is not a legal burden. It is a global human rights standard that will benefit every user in the end. Secondly, accessibility includes a clear market growth potential of 27% in the EU. The most sustainable approach is a proactive mindset, not a reactive mindset. We shouldn't be driven by risk. We should be driven by motivation to help people, to make sure that we develop products that are usable by everyone. Because in the end, that's the reason why we start developing products, start providing services to fix issues in society and not to create extra issues. Fourth argument or takeaway, start your maturity program with communication and knowledge, invest in your culture, and communicate to the end user, communicate with your customer. And of course, last but not least, IO can help you with building your accessibility culture for success if you need guidance with your maturity program. So that was it. I have currently time for some Q&A questions. So if you have a question, feel free to raise it and then we'll discuss. Do we have any questions, Jasna? I think it's a file. Is there a way to rate your websites? Okay, first question. I think this is about evaluating the full governance or full coverage of your website. There is a way to rate your website on a global level, on a full level, but that's only through automated testing because manual testing is a very intensive part that we have to do manually, of course. So to rate your full website, if that answers your question, you will need automated tools to evaluate on a URL basis. But important to mention here is that if you perform automated testing only, that will only provide you with 30% coverage of the WCAG criteria. So auditing accessibility compliance is always a combination of automated testing and manual testing, where automated testing covers 30% and the remaining gap of 70% is through manual testing. Okay, are the digital accessibility figures for Belgium more or less the same as in the Netherlands, or are there any striking differences? I honestly don't know exactly the numbers for Netherlands, but seen or looking at the European statistics, I think it's approximately the same. But the things I do know is that in the Netherlands, they already started accessibility a lot more earlier than in Belgium. We are very late with accessibility, very late with transposition of the European standard in our Belgian national legislation. So I think, honestly, I think in the Netherlands, they are better off at this moment than Belgium. But seen or looking at the global or the European statistics, the general accessibility is not the position where we want to be in. Next question, you mentioned a high percentage of people not having access to internet, 4 of 10. Okay, yeah, Jasna is still completing the question. Does that relate to people with disabilities only? No, that's why I added the digital vulnerability statistics, is because it doesn't relate specifically to people with disability. As for example, your grandmother or grandfather who is not familiar with e-administration, for example. That's why it's a huge issue that banking offices are closing, because those people still rely on a physical point of contact. And that's why I've added next to people with disabilities, 25% of the Europe, that we also have to include people who are digitally vulnerable to write the inclusion story, not only from an accessibility point of view, but from an inclusive point of view, to make sure that every part of our society can continue, can use the products that we provide. So no, it's not only specific for people with disabilities, it's a broad perspective for everyone, regardless of disability or inability. Can you please repeat the question to the answer of Tobias' question? Tobias' question was, yeah, is there a way to rate your websites based on URL? So important to know, from a compliancy level, you have to do combination of automated and manual testing. Automated testing is something that is very quick. It's a tool that you can run on a URL basis. So you can evaluate accessibility based on that tool. The issue with automated testing is that it only covers 30% of WCAG criteria. So you can only reach 30% if you fix everything, compliancy rate. So that's why you also need to perform audits to evaluate your processes, to make sure that you do also manual testing to fill the gap of the remaining 70%. So if you want to test your full website, all pages, or a huge list of pages based on URL, you can do that through automated testing, but keep in mind, automated testing only covers 30%. Automated testing can be performed by using tools. There is a tool in Belgium, for example, that provides you with just a form field where you can add in the URLs, and that will generate a report based on the URLs that you have provided. So those are tools that you can use. You have different tools. You also have web extensions. So I can also explain that if you are interested in a training program. It's called the BOSA reporting. I will share a link. Automated. It's called the BOSA accessibility check. I will send the link in chat. So that's a tool that you can use. It's also developed by teams at I/O. A tool that you can use to evaluate on URL basis the accessibility. This tool is primarily configured, or the goal of this tool was to evaluate government websites, but you can of course use it for other examples too. This is okay. Another way to answer the question is you can grade your website. Scores are more likely. Okay, yeah, John added some extra guidance to my answer. Are there any other questions? Does this tool provide categorization by types of issues, and do we have go page by page or mass upload to work for testing? It's definitely based on the criteria, so it will report based on the criteria. Where do you fail? What is the current status? What is the conformance level, single A, double A? So all those details will be provided by the tool. The important thing here is that it's really a bulk operation. So you can identify it yourself, but the best strategy is to select a couple of most impactful features. For example, on an e-commerce platform, you will have to focus on your purchase flow at first to perform the automated and manual testing on the most impactful features of your product or your service. To have an indication of your full website, we all know full website coverage is not something that we can do. It's too cost intensive. So you can use this tool through automated testing to have a global overview of all pages or a lot of pages. But in the end, accessibility is also about providing accessibility to the most impactful features to have the best impact on your end user. So if you have a purchase flow in e-commerce, if you have an essential communication flow or information flow in a content platform, then that should be your focus towards accessibility compliance at first. So you also have to prioritize in the user flows the impact on your end user. Another question, is BOSA only working for France and Belgium? I don't know, honestly. I know for sure they are working in the Belgian government, but I don't know for sure if it's also in France. I don't think so, but I'm not sure. What are the things being tested with R70% that are done manually? Great question. Automated testing can check, for example, the semantics of your page. Do you use the correct heading structure? Do you start with the heading H1? Do you go to H2, then H3? Or do you skip? Do you go from H1 immediately to H3? So that's something that an automated tool can check. An automated tool can't check if your video has correct captions, correct transcripts, if a video is providing correct alt text. That's something that depends on the context of the image. And that's why you need the manual testing, for example. Also, keyboard testing. Some of those things we can identify, for example, can you tab to all the content through your keyboard? There are tools to identify if you can tab to all the interactive components. But to identify if it really works, if you interact with certain components, certain features, we have to do that in a manual context. That's not something that a tool can do. So we have to be aware also in the current state of our market, there are a lot of companies sharing that their automated tool can reach 50, 60, 70% of compliancy. That's something that's more marketing than the end results, because the end result is not focused on compliancy. It's just about providing or trying to tackle services as much as possible and to get as much as possible the projects for accessibility. So if you use manual testing and automated testing, Still, the automated testing is 30, maximum 40% of coverage. If you see something else, it's probably you have to do something with AI, but we all know AI is something to help us, but doesn't give an end result that we need or that we can interpret or formulate in an official audit report. I hope that answers your question. Okay, another question, do you also provide training for the manual testing part? Yes, specifically for design and development training, we also provide testing workflows. We give hands-on tooling, which tools they can use for automated, but also which considerations that they can take into account to make sure that they can verify the solution that they've built themselves that is also compliant. Because in the end, you will receive a report with what has been failed. You have to fix it, but you also should be able to verify if the fix that you implemented is also the right fix. So that's why we also invest in providing reports with solution proposals to make sure that you can verify what the outcome should be, and that you can also, through the manual testing part, through the automated testing part, you can also verify yourself. The end goal is to grow towards accessibility maturity, more accessibility maturity at every level, technical, design, and support. So indeed, our training programs also include testing workflows and tooling. Another question by Tim. Talking about AI, wouldn't OpenAI operator or Manus be able to do the testing of the 70% as they mimic a user clicking around and they could execute tests? The issue with AI is that you have to provide prompts or to guide them with how to test. That's the difficulty in accessibility. There are different scenarios. Again, it's a whole spectrum, different scenarios, different contexts. So we really have to start the conversation with the people and not try to use AI. We can use it as a first level of guidance, but we're talking about people. So AI cannot fill in the gaps that people identify or encounter. So AI is a great tool. We also use AI in our auditing process, but not to an extent that we rely on AI to test or to fill in the 70% manual testing gap. I hope that answers your question. Any other questions? All right, maybe one question Arnaud is typing, and then we'll round it off. Okay, it was just a thank you message. All right, just to round it off, if you have any questions, feel free to contact me. I've added my email address and telephone number as the last slide of this webinar. They will be shared via email. So if you have any questions or you need follow-up, we will definitely have a conversation. Thank you.